Okay, so I think I'm there. Okay, so we are going through Esther chapters 1 and 2. And so in my study Bible, it has a little, like, at the beginning of every chapter, it has a little bit of, like, it's called behind the text. So it kind of gives you some historical context to it. So it gives you the setting of it, like, okay, what time? Oh, you can't see this. It gives you like what time in history it was. It gives you a summary of the Bible. There's also, like, in the very beginning of this study Bible, it has like a timeline, and so it shows you um, like what other historical figures are. Oh, here she comes. What other historical figures were alive during this time, and what else is going on during this time, just to make it, I guess, come all together. Because I like to understand. Hello, I like to understand.
Hey, Rosita.
I like to understand what I'm reading, and because I know that the Bible is a history book, I want to know, like, what's the history that, I guess, us, man would approve of. Like, we know that there it was a prince of Persia. We know that there was actual Babylon. I feel like a lot of times people try to make it seem like the Bible isn't real. So I like to figure out in history, what actually was going on. So anyway, so at the beginning of my like the synopsis of the study Bible, one of the things that it said that I really liked was the author of Esther wanted his readers to see the mystery of God's hand in history. He chose to show how human decisions and action are the instrumentation of divine purposes. So the part that really stuck out to me was how he chose to show how human decisions and actions are the instrumentation of divine purpose. So that means that we have a part to play in divine purpose. And um, there was, I don't know, it's like a saying that basically is saying, like, what God does, he does through people, which is true. The things that he gets done on the earth, a lot of it he does through other people. And so the decisions that we make play, you know, into that. And I guess just like I guess an easy example of that is like when God ordained Saul to be king, he made a decision to not listen to God, and he lost his favor. That one decision that he made lost his whole favor, and then they had to come and find a new king. So the decisions that we make have an impact. And so we're going to read Esther, and I feel like there's so much that we can, like, get from Esther. It's one of my favorite books in the Bible. But because we're talking specifically on marriage, I want us to kind of just focus on, like, the women slash marriage aspect of it, and kind of looking at it from different perspectives. So an analogy that God gave me in a dream, and so this is gonna look crazy, but so Kayla got me this for our bachelorette gift or whatever. I have my anointing oil in it, but we'll just use this part as an example. So one time I was like in a dream, and something was going on in my life, and I was like, God, I know I'm right. Like, I know what's going on in the situation. And basically, what he was showing me is that every situation is kind of like this diamond. And you know how diamonds are multifaceted. They have different little faces on it. And so there's an infinite, like, possibilities of different faces that you can see when a diamond is cut. And so you're saying, like, you could only see the perspective of just right here, but there's still so much more to whatever the situation is. So instead of, like, just focusing on, like, oh, I'm right here, but there's still, so much more around it. So I want us to, like, look at it from, different perspectives, because there's so many different areas that we can glean from the Bible. Because I know, like, I could read Esther a million times, and the 157th time I read, I'm like, wow, I never noticed that was in there, because your perspective is different. So I kind of want us to look at it from that perspective, opening our perspectives, looking at it from an optimistic perspective as well as a pessimistic perspective. So before we start, I just wanted to give, I guess, a little bit of history to it, because, like I said, this is one of my favorite books of the Bible. So I've done a lot of, I guess, research about it. And so some of the key points that I just wanted to point out that kind of like frame my reference, just so I guess you can help you see where I'm seeing from. So one, this is talking about a Persian king. So he was not one of God's chosen people. But it also shows that how even behind the scenes, years in the making, God was orchestrating a plan to save his people. And so I guess a small story, how they even ended up there. Ooh, scare me. Um, it's okay. Um, they ended up there because they were in exile. Um, so they had to leave their land. Their king got captured, and so they were living there in Babylon in exile. Um, so Queen Vashti, whose name means beautiful, she lived up to her namesake, but she was the daughter of Babylon, and so we know that Babylon was a society that was known for its lawlessness and its lack of morality. And we also can say that, or we can conclude from some, I guess, historical context, some people say, which I find that it's usually people that are not believers that tend to say this, but I'll just say it for saying sake, that they say that Queen Vashti, she refused the king because we'll read the scripture a little later, but they're saying that she was asked to come to the crown or come to see the king in her crown, but they were saying that it was only her crown, so she was supposed to come naked with just her crown on in front of all of the men in the kingdom. Now it doesn't say that in scripture, but it does say, I looked up some sources from like Jewish people or whatever, or like Jewish scholars that say that that's why she didn't want to come. But some also say that she was known for being, very rah because she came from this society that lacked morality, that lacked lawlessness. So she was allegedly known for flaunting her naked body and showing herself off. And so she said no because of an act of rebellion and power, basically. Um, Another reason why that I love this book is because it is thought that kind of in chapter 2, where it talks about the parade of young virgins, is actually what is thought to be kind of the first iteration of a pageant. As we know, I like pageants. And so it's an iteration of the modern day beauty pageant where all the young virgins, they paraded themselves before the king in hopes that they would be a queen. Um, Another one was, you see that God caused a divorce. So first marriage that didn't work, but he caused the second marriage to be a prosperous one, which we don't often see, um, you know, too many divorces. It was the first that I've seen that were on these kind of terms, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But basically, um, divorce that is like described in Deuteronomy were for reasons of basically infidelity. If there was some sort of infidelity or adultery, those were like the only grounds for divorce. But we see here that there was a divorce because of what some say is disobedience or disagreement between the couple. And I guess it just shows us the difference of how sacred a covenant is with people that know God and people that don't know God. So the first scriptures that we'll be, I guess, kind of dissecting, and we'll kind of be going through all of it, but just these ones I kind of wanted to highlight were Esther chapter 1, and this is verses 10 to 12. And it says, on the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from his wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, I'm not going to say their names, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger. And so I guess just a little bit of backstory. King Xerxes was throwing like a banquet, and they used to have banquets that would last weeks. Like a wedding ceremony would last a couple weeks, where they would have parties every single day leading up to what was the big party. And so on the seventh day, all the men in the kingdom were having a party basically with the king, and then all the women were having a party, if you will, or a banquet or whatever with Queen Vashti. And so in this thing where I could see a couple, I guess, fruit that she's displaying here. I guess from the different perspectives, I could see three. And the first one would be pride. So, what it made me think of was she was hosting the ladies in the land, all the ladies in the land. And how many times do we hear of women getting around other women or getting around friends and they start acting different? Or they believe that, okay, if I'm in a certain level of status and power, that, I can, say whatever I want to my husband, or I can say whatever I want to my kids to show that, I know what I'm doing. And so it made me think of pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall, which is Proverbs 16:18. The other one that I could see was rebellion. So she decided to not only refuse her king, which we know in those times you could get your head literally separated from your shoulders if you refused your king to do something, but not only her king but her husband, and it was in front of everybody in the kingdom, so all of the women and all of the men, and she did a blatant act of rebellion. And we know that, just on, I guess, this side of the covenant, rebellion keeps us from, God. And so another perspective that it could have been was that she maybe was trying to take a stand. Sorry?
I'm sorry. Hold on.
Okay.
Somebody's home. I didn't expect them to be here.
Okay. um, so taking a stand for her people or women or whatever. So she could have been trying to stand up for women. She could have been trying to set up like a political coup or whatever it's called. There could have been some political reason for it. And it made me think that sometimes when women feel like voiceless in their marriage, sometimes they try to, like, when they get in a group setting, they try to, I guess, what is it called, like when you want like that group, like kind of like that group thought, like, oh well, now yeah, you're right, he did this, or yeah, you're right, like they're trying to get like that, I don't know what to call it, but trying to get people to, come on board for, what it is that, they're talking about, or what it is that they're doing. And so it makes me think about that. And the next thing was um, basically what is happening here. And let me read the third verse, or excuse me, verse 13 after this one, where it says, uh, Then the king said to the wise men, which, oh, wait, let me read it in different, or in the same translation, because I like how this translation said it. It said, Then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, and it says, according to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti because she had not performed the command of King, whatever, delivered by the eunuchs. In another version that I can't find off the top of my head, it says he immediately went to his council. So he immediately consulted his council of wise advisors. I found it. So I think it shows that, which we'll talk about in a second, how important, I guess, wise counsel is, or how important it is to know the counsel, or who is, has the ear of, your spouse. And so basically, what to me was played out here was basically a marital debate. And I know if you've been married for at least 5 seconds, there's going to be some sort of marital debate. But this was a marital debate that happened in public. And so it got me to thinking, it's like, okay, so she is in this position of power, which I think we all at, some level have a position of power. So we're in some sort of position of power and influence. And because I think we're all influential to the people that are around us. So what happens if there is something that I don't agree with that he says, or there's something that he doesn't agree with that I says, but it's all happening, within the spew of the public? How are we supposed to act? And so it made me think, I was like, okay, so what if, because there's no biblical evidence to say that he really asked her to come naked to the thing, but what if, he asked her to do that? Is it, if your husband is wrong, do you publicly correct him? Do you embarrass him? Do you tell him that he's wrong? do you
Rosita.
do you pull him to the side? And like that's what it made me think of. It's like, okay, so I know in this situation, like I feel in this situation, how she handled it could have been different. So that one decision, it literally cost her marriage. And so it made me think like, okay, so what do I do? Because on one hand, I could just dismiss him and I could stand in my pride and say, whatever, or I can humble myself and I can wait till we get home. Like, look, I'm about to bust you in your nose because why would you do that to me? Like, you know, it really just made me think like, when you're outside, so to say, is important to like not have a house divided. And so, not saying that he was right in the situation or she was right in the situation. I don't know because I don't have any background. I don't know what their status was, what their whatever was. But what the evidence here is telling me is that because how she responded to him publicly, it basically rerouted the whole course of her life. He divorced her and basically banished her. So it said that he one immediately went and consulted with his wise advisors. And so that made me think, okay, we need to be mindful of our husband's wise counsel because in this situation, there was a situation where if we just take king and queen out, these husband and wives, they didn't agree to each other. The wife did something to embarrass the king or embarrass the husband, and now they beefing, but everybody sees it. It's in everybody, all eyes is on them. So it made me think that who is the wise counsel that is talking to your husband? Because it says instead of him going to her or she going to him, like because what she could have did if he did say, hey, I want you to come butt naked in front of all these people, what she could have did was she could have came clothed and say, okay, look, I need you to, you're tripping, like what's going on, like why are you looking at me like that?
Who's that? Rosita?
Oh, no, you.
Oh, I'm trying to. I walked in on the tail end of that.
Oh, okay.
And I was trying to figure out who we were talking about in the
Okay.
Bible who got the divorce because.
Okay. So we're talking about Queen Vashti and Queen or King Xerxes. So
So they
yeah, so they were married. So she was the king and or sorry, she was the queen and he was the king. So they were, married. And so I guess what stuck out to me, like, look, I guess hyper focusing on the marriage aspect of it was that um immediately when this happened, instead of them consulting one another, he immediately went and consulted his wise counsel. And then his wise counsel had so much like power and influence, like so much, power in his ear. The wise counsel told him to never speak to his wife again, to leave her and to get a new wife, make a stand out of her since she wants to embarrass you. So it makes me think like I know, a lot of people they, tend to pray for their children and pray that, they have good friends and things like that. But I think it shows me that I also need to make sure that, whoever's in my husband's corner that is also wise counsel as well, because you don't know what kind of influence that person in his camp could have on your marriage. Because to me, that like looking at it from like a wife's perspective, I mess up every day. I I'm not perfect. I could make one mistake and he could go and tell, his mama or something like that. I mean, just as an example. And if she had that much power and influence, she could say, okay, well, leave her. And then he would do it. That's scary because that's, coming against your covenant.
Mhm.
And so it shows me that sometimes there could be deception that comes from your own camp, that comes from the people that are around you, and making sure that like the marriage is like set on a firm foundation of the two of you, of course, with God. And we know here that these people were not God's people, and so that also shows me that okay, this is how people that are not of God act, that means that I should be doing something different. So when I come into a situation where, Claude's like, come here and pick this up off the floor or whatever in front of everybody, and I'm like, okay, that's embarrassing. Like if I chose to like, I guess, sow strife into the situation, that it could have, it could plant a seed basically. And so it just, I guess, shows me like how to view the situation differently, basically.
Yeah.
Um, which I know is a little bit of a check too, because it's like, I know that I could want to be prideful. I could want to say, well, she didn't do anything wrong. Like, I wouldn't have came either. But it's also, I guess, deeper than just, um, making that one decision. Because, like the quote said at the beginning, it shows how he chose human decision and action are instrumentation of divine purposes. So that means that it could be good or bad, but our
Mm-hmm.
decisions, really matter. Um, and so it also shows me how when you take a decision without consulting God, that it can be detrimental to you and your livelihood. And so, like we said, Queen Vashti, we know that she was from the people of Babylon, who were notorious for being lawless and wild and frivolous or whatever. But we know that she took a decision, but it makes me think that I have to take a decision, or when I'm taking decisions, to remembering like who I am as a wife, who I'm supposed to be as a wife. And remembering that I'm supposed to be a gift. I'm a good thing to my husband, and that, when there's order between the two of us, that it produces good fruit. And so if I take that into comparison, or take that into like, into thought when I'm making decisions. I think it also kind of like when we talked a couple weeks ago about being slow to speak, and quick to listen. So I think like in this situation, we can make sure that we are being, slowing to reacting as well, and saying like, okay, like I don't think this is a point to say that, we should be walked on. Obviously not, but just being wiser in our decisions is what it's telling me, because of Queen Vashti's, her, as some people say, disrespect and disobedience. Because one of the scriptures, it says that the guy basically who was talking into the ear of the king, um, basically he was saying like, we need to make an example out of her so that, there could be respect, that we can receive respect from our wives, because they thought that it was going to show that, well, everybody can just be disrespectful and just do whatever we want to anybody. And I think it goes both ways. I don't think it's just, for wives to respect husbands, but I think it should be, both ways. But her actions show us that because of her position and her decision, that may or may not have been wise, affected not just her, or it could have affected not just her, but it could have affected, um, society, or the social construct of the kingdom that it was, if we're looking at it into that perspective. But it can also, looking at it into the perspectives of our family, like it could, change our family dynamic if there's, discord between the two of us. Like I hear like a lot of, parents, of course you guys as kids are grown, but a lot of parents, they say that, they try not to, fight in front of their kids, because they want to appear, they just don't want to show, I guess, their dirty laundry in front of the kids or whatever. They're trying to put a good example of it. So I think that is kind
A
of,
unified front.
yeah, exactly. I think that is kind of the same basis here, where it's saying like, just because they disagree, and I think it's healthy to disagree, because if not, then, you're just taking your voice away. But like she said, having a good unified front when you're, in front of people, I guess. So I don't think that, Queen Vashti was a villain. I don't think there's any scripture that says she was a villain, but I just think it just shows how fragile a marriage can be when it's, one, not protected by God, and when it, two, doesn't have that same firm foundation of God. So like when God is not your foundation, it's easy to see how one decision could, break everything. Um, and so, kind of going into chapter two, after, whoever was in the ear of the king got his way, they decided, like, okay, well, we will have basically a parade, and some translations say a parade of the beautiful young virgins in the kingdom, and they will all present themselves in front of the king, and whichever one most pleases the king, when they finally, see him, will be able to be queen. And so it showed me here that I thought was very crazy, that so they got all of these beautiful women from all over the kingdom, and hopes that one of them would be the queen, but they all had to go through this like purification process. And they had to go through these purification or beauty treatments, and these things took an entire year. So they had to go through an entire year of beautification before they could even be in the presence of the king. um, and so what really came to my mind is that, um, thinking about our marriage, not our physical marriage, but more so our um, marriage with God, is that, we should be in a preparation to go before the king. Like, we should be cleaning ourselves up to be in the presence of a king. So are we preparing ourselves well to go before the king? Like, I think it's in Revelations when it talks about how the young virgins, how they had prepared themselves and they had enough oil for their lamps, um, so that when he came, they had everything together. They were ready to just pick up. And so that's basically talking about what, most people call like the rapture, how they were basically preparing themselves. And so when I thought about it, I thought about how we prepare ourselves, how we purify ourselves before we go to the king. And when I say go to the king, I mean like either, going on the glory to the king, or like, him coming down to get us. Um, but what it also says here is that if you go a little further in this chapter, um, where it says that, as she's like, getting all these treatments, as she's, getting herself purified or whatever, she obtained favor from the Lord, or from, well, he didn't say the Lord, but we know that, God's hand is orchestrating all of these things going on, which we'll see once we get further down into um, the book of Esther. But we can see that she obtained favor in the process of the cleaning and the beautification of herself. And that means to me that even in the ugly parts that she found favor. So even in the ugly parts of us cleaning ourselves up, that, God could still find favor in us, when, I'm trying to be less prideful. I'm trying to make sure that I'm humble. But, sometimes that looks ugly. But I know that even in that, me kind of fighting through, you know, whatever I'm going through, fighting through, trying to, humble myself, that, it could be an ugly process, but knowing that even in, I guess, the ugly process, that um, we can still find favor from God. And then another thing that just like really, really stuck out to me, like in this whole preparation process, is that she was able to keep a secret. And I think that's so powerful, because there's so many times I believe that, God will tell us something, and we'll go immediately and say, "Oh, the Lord told me so and so and so and so," before we even have, asked him to say, "Hey, are we allowed to say this? Are we allowed to do this?" Like, she was able, for years, it says that she was able to like hold on to this secret. She was able to hold on to something. And I know there's been times where God has told me something. It's like, okay, don't say something, just wait. Or like, if you know something to be true and you want nothing more but to, say like, hey, you need to XYZ. But God is like, no, not yet, because, his timing is perfect. And then we say it anyway. And now we have unaligned ourselves with the will of God because we weren't obedient. So I think here it just shows, like, in her preparation, that not only was she, doing the work to clean herself up, but she was also like being diligent and making sure that she was acting out of good honor, and, keeping some things to herself. And, I feel like, with women, men too, though, like, we have a hard time keeping things to ourselves, and, making sure that, whether it be gossip, whether it be, a good thing, or your marital business or your family business, like keeping it to
Men
ourselves.
talk.
Men do
do
talk,
talk.
and I
Yeah.
feel like they talk more than women, but
Yes, I do too.
A whole lot more. Exactly. Lord have mercy.
but I just think it's so noble of her here that she kept her mouth shut for that long. So we know that she was to hide her identity from, who eventually became her husband, as we'll, go into more detail later. But so we know there's a whole year of this purification process. She still kept her mouth closed. there were years when she now was queen, and she was in and out of the king's presence. She still kept her mouth closed. It came all the way to the point where God was able to use it, like that she actually opened up her mouth. So it didn't come out until after she had, was able to use it, after she had continuously found favor with her husband, where she was able to say, look, I know this, that, and the third. And because of her obedience, I also think that is why, God found favor with her and she was able to save her people. So I think that is a good I guess reminder for me to bridle my tongue, which is something I've been very trying to be diligent about, specifically making sure I'm not gossiping, because we know that it is not honorable to God. So making sure I'm not telling people's business, make sure I'm not telling my business unnecessarily, and learning how to keep quiet. And like it's and I know, like, for women, we tend to, like, overshare because we want to like connect with other women. And it sees that even here, like, she was still able to like find favor without oversharing all of her business. So it's like, wow, that's something that really, stuck out to me. So that's all the, I guess, notes that I have. I do have a couple of like main, I guess, takeaways when I read these two things. Was one, like, as a marital couple, being mindful of what I do publicly with my husband, or making sure that I'm not publicly, going out of my way to embarrass him, or, vice versa, make sure he's not trying to publicly go out of his way to embarrass me, or, making sure that we are like the unified front, like she said, and we're not, basically, he not the op and I'm not the op, basically. And making sure that I seek the face of the Lord before I make any rash decisions when dealing with my husband. Because even something that, we could think is trivial, like, because that could have been trivial to her, like, I'm just not coming to see you right now. That could have been so trivial. And we've seen that, it had basically an irreversible seed that caused all of this division between them, just because, she could have made a rash decision. So it tells me, okay, I need to be mindful of the decisions that I'm taking, and, making sure I'm taking them before the Lord. And it doesn't always have to be like okay, God, I just need your wisdom to try to figure out what I'm going to say back. It's like, even just like a quick, like, okay, God, like, I know you heard him say that. Like, what do I say? Like, just bringing him into your everyday, vocabulary, your everyday, thought process. And it shows me that, if you are in a place of power, making sure that you are approaching situations with wisdom and knowledge, and not just approaching them, or not approaching them, from a prideful place, because they think, oh, well, because I'm in a place of power, because I have influence, that I can just be lawless and I can do whatever I want. But no, we don't need to act like that. And then being mindful of, who we are counseling when, something goes wrong, instead of like, if there's an issue that goes on between your couple, or a couple, or whatever, instead of them going to one another, they were going to other people. So making sure that, like, if I have a problem with Claude gonna have to see me about the problem. So just making sure that I'm consulting my spouse first, and not just running to my friends to tell them, like, oh, let me tell you what he did, because, oh, he just got on my nerves. So these are the takeaways that I had from the first two chapters. Um, are there any takeaways that you guys had that you would want to talk about? And if you want to, I can end the video now if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I got a few things.
Okay.
If my brain will work. You mentioned something about, who did Vashti? Did she talk to somebody before she said she wasn't going?
No, she didn't talk to anybody. She consulted herself and just said no. But after it happened, it says in the New Living Translation, I think it's verse 13, it says, he immediately counseled with his wise advisors. So he immediately went to go talk to his homeboys or whatever. when it happened. So that's the Elijah version.
Well, and it can work in the reverse too when you talk about learning to bridle your tongue. Sometimes you can bridle your tongue too much and too long.
Mm-hmm.
And, whatever influence you should have, you don't.
Yeah.
And so it can work in the reverse. And when you were talking earlier, I said to myself, I'm going back to counseling. Yeah, but this was good. And and like I said, I listened to it prior to, so I kind of had, some stuff in my head already, and was just waiting to see how you interpreted that and brought that back.
Yeah, so I had to come into the room because Deron is in there crazy. But yeah, this one kind of hit home because I have to sometimes watch myself and what I say in front of other people, because we want to say, "You idiot, that don't even sound right." But I don't. I keep it to myself, and then I tell it to them in the background. But it's hard because you be like, "Oh my God, why would he say that?" And I'm like, "Lord, in the name of Jesus, keep your mouth closed. Please keep my mouth closed." So I gotta talk to myself to make sure that I don't disrespect him in any way or cause him shame, because I don't want him to feel as if I don't respect him, because I do completely respect him. It's just some things he's saying. It just sometimes is not logical, and his logical way of thinking is different than my logical way of thinking sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, ooh. And then I have to, even then, when you come home to talk to them about it, you have to carefully choose your words so it does not hinder, one, the communication, and two, the respect we have for each other, and the way he accepts, I guess, criticism. You know what I'm saying? So I have to, it's hard being married. Lord have mercy. I didn't realize how hard it was.
Nobody told me this.
Yeah, nobody. No. My mama didn't tell me this. But I mean, I know I've seen it, because it was not like, she'll say something to Daddy and Leah say something to Uncle Mott. And I'd be like, why would they belittle them? Why would they say that? And then there are some days that Mama would say, that's the best man that ever happened to me. This is what he does for me. This is what he does for your kids, or my kids. And I'm like, well, why would you even say that? Mm-hmm. But, I don't think it ever, I mean, it might have pierced Daddy at a point, but at a certain point it didn't, because he knew that unconditional love came from Mama, and whatever they got or was said, they're going to get over it because they're going to discuss it. Mm-hmm. So as long as you have that type of communication with your husband, then I think things will be all right. Yeah. So that was good, Leisha. Very good.
Yeah, I definitely am ministering to myself first. So it's like, okay, making sure I'm watching my tongue and being slow to speak. Not my new thing, but I'm like, okay, let me think about it first, and then I'll talk to you about it.
This is what I do. I go, he's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm biting my tongue. And he'll be like, ah. Okay. So that's my thing.
Yeah.
That's good.
So. Yeah, I have I always used to kind of go by I don't know who told me that, but like if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And so I just like, you know what? No, I don't have anything at all to say, because I'm about to rip you a new one. But it's like, you know what? No, I don't have anything. So like last week, I was super upset at him over something so stupid. It was very stupid, but I was fire. Oh, I forgot. I was fire hot mad, and so I got in the car and I said, ah! And I said, Thank you, Jesus, that my husband is such a good provider. He is so
Come on.
kind and he is so like, and I just did not feel it at all. But I was like, I'm not gonna use my mouth, which I know gives life or death. So I'm not gonna use my words to curse my marriage because I believe what the Bible says. It says the two became one. So he is also me and I am also him. And so a lot of times the stuff that he be making mad out of me is a reflection of me. And so I'm like, okay, I need to get myself together. And it helped a little bit. Not a lot of it, but it helped a little bit. I'll admit. But it all worked out because we, I guess, got over it. So yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Was there any other takeaways or any other fruit that you've seen?
No, I came in late, so I kind of missed the first 10 minutes. So, but what I did get, I think I got something out of it. So
I definitely did.
Okay. Great. So
great.
Well, that's all I have. We went fast today, so great. So for the next couple of ones, we're gonna keep going through the rest of Esther. So next week we'll go through 3 and 4. I don't know how long that'll be. So we're almost done because God said 14 weeks. So this is week 9. So we only have a few more after this. So we're coming to a close.
5 more weeks. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, so I'll probably take a break after that and then maybe do like once a month with just any woman that wants to come.
In the family. Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll see
you
next week. Same time, same
place.
place.
Love y'all.
Good night. Love you.
Good night.